This week on the podcast, Deron, Delgado, Dirty Bird community was and is like still one of the most powerful communities in dance music.
We've never been the one that's like, okay, let's sign the big, huge record from X amount, X DJ that's at the top right now.
Frankly, the record label now is just the loss leader. You know, starting a dance music record label is definitely not a get-rich-quick scheme.
Deron, finally, we're making this happen.
We're here.
Where in the world are you right now?
I am in San Francisco at the Empire headquarters here in a small little room where I can get some privacy.
Nice. What time is it? It's got to be like 8:30 in the morning.
Yeah, it is 8:30. Came here nice and early just to get some quiet time with you.
Oh, damn. How romantic.
I got candles burning in
How many pictures of me have you got up there right now?
Yeah. Good, man. Thanks for having me. Excited to chat with you as always.
No, likewise, man. I've been looking forward to this one for a while, actually. You've been part of my career for a very long time, on and off, of like the roles that you've played.
Yeah.
And also you've been an integral part to a lot of my friends' careers as well. in this world. So for anybody listening, let's dig into a little bit of your history.
Sure.
And then we can dig into what you're doing today.
Yeah. So without going, I guess, too far back, but I got my degree in audio engineering in 2000, but I'm a shitty engineer. I know what all the buttons do, but so I started a record label in college, kind of like just because that's how I want to do it, be on the business side of things. And then, I was DJing, whatever. And then I started a digital download store in 2004, which came out a couple months after Beatport, called Stompy, based on the parties that we were doing here. My partner handled all the development, and I handled just basically trying to convince distributors and labels to sell their songs digitally during that time, which lasted about 10 years. So I was in the heyday of the digital download world. And then also started a distribution company, the sister company to a digital distributor that was based in Berlin called Paradise. And I was the managing director out here, once again, trying to convince people now to go to streaming. So I was doing that. And right about the same time as when Barkley, Cloud Bunch Stroke, kind of was going through a revamp of Dirty Bird, who I'd known all the guys like Justin, Christian, Worthy, everyone even before. We all grew up in the San Francisco scene together. So he never had like a proper label manager. So he's like, hey man, like I'm ready, kind of revamp the whole thing. And that was in 2015, I believe. Yeah, it's 10 years now. So I kind of came in and kind of revamped all the Dirty Bird. Like Barkley's like, I don't want to do anything but make music and point and shoot at things. So that's kind of where I started with Dirty Bird. And then fast forward to about 3 years ago, Empire, which is a label and distribution, one of the biggest in America. They we had a lot of success in hip hop and R&B. Like they put out like Kendrick Lamar's first albums, Anderson .Paak's albums. We just put out the Shabuzi record that's been going crazy. But they wanted to start a dance music arm, but no matter how many platinum records you have on the wall, dance music is marketed and done so much different. So that's kind of where that Dirty Bird acquisition came in. And I came over, and I'm the VP now with our GM Moody. We kind of help lead that department now. And, whether it be artist deals, distribution deals, publishing deals, etc. So Dirty Bird is still kind of its own entity within that. And then I help oversee our department on basically all those things. So kind of just everything, but without pressing the buttons in the studio. So
love that. Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it now, especially in America, where I think for forever in that I can ever remember, like the major labels in the UK have always had like a dance music or dance side of their labels. It's always been massively part of the British culture. Same with in other places in Europe, especially Germany. Germany's had a huge, like a lot of the majors, and now it's really interesting to see a lot of the American majors are kind of doing that as well. How is it differently from working as an independent to working with a major team?
I mean, fortunately, unlike a major, which has kind of got shareholders, which is a little bit different structure, right? Like, so if you sign a record here and something's popping off in the UK, you kind of got to go through all the red tape and extra
Yeah.
splits and blah, blah. So fortunately, Empire is, we're all under one roof. So,
Yeah.
that being said, that means there's a lot of the levers and tools that we can pull that weren't available to us. I mean, even just in Dirty Bird, when we came over, we're able to do writing camps in our studio now. We've had a full sales team. We've had more streaming success and more covers and more playlisting than we ever did.
Yeah.
Um, and that's power of basically the team. So, I think it's a little bit different, I guess, than like what a major is, but we get a lot of the same benefits of that in terms of like the actual manpower and just resources for sure.
Yeah, I use the word major loosely because I think
Yes.
there's although it's an independent to a certain extent, like there's a difference between where Empire's at and where an electronic independent artist
Yeah.
ran record label, even to where Dirty Bird was at the beginning, right? With you when you kind of got involved, it was still a
Yeah.
very independent way. There's way less funding. There's way less pressure on records. There's a way smaller team.
Yeah.
You don't have as much power, right?
No.
Um, what do you prefer?
I mean, honestly, when this is probably the best situation that, frankly,
Yeah.
myself personally, and I think even Dirty Birkin went in. I mean, we were talking to a few people about, during the acquisition process, and I think um, this one, while it might not have been the obvious choice,
Mm.
considering what their history is and outside of it, it actually ended up being the best choice simply because now we've created something instead of kind of going in and just kind of form into something else's what they're doing. We've kind of been able to form our own department and within that, rather than just like, okay, we're just square box square hole type thing, right? So
Yeah.
um we've been very fortunate to where we're building something that we can be a little bit more, take a little bit more risks, or just do things that a bit differently that maybe weren't just so in the box because of this other company was doing. So for me, it's been great. I mean, I'm
Mm.
working with some amazing artists that I haven't been able, caliber that I probably haven't been able to work through in the past simply because
Yeah.
of the independence. But um, it's just been really rewarding for sure, just to see the growth in the department, our team, Dirty Bird, the people that we're working with and stuff like that. It's been very refreshing for sure.
No, I can imagine, definitely. So let's go back to the Dirty Bird days.
Yeah,
Or let's go back to the acquisition days. I'm really
yeah,
interested in this. Obviously, you can't divulge too much information because it's not all
yeah, sure.
public knowledge, right? But I guess that day that was there a day that Bark came into you or came into a meeting, came into a phone call and was like, dude, I'm out. And
Yeah.
what is that process from there? Is you as being part of Dirty Bird from day one, and you was going, okay, how do we look forward and how do we move forward?
Yeah, I mean, Barkley and his wife Andy, who kind of running it. There was no secret that they, kind of they're ready to move on. I think Barkley really wanted to continue to grow as more as an artist and DJ. And
Yeah,
look, running a label and publishing company and events, as you know, it's like
it's a lot.
the creative process gets sometimes stifled and stuff. And so, especially after the pandemic, right? I think that's when it kind of hit them like, okay, what are we going to do? What's our lives going to be like moving forward? So that's kind of where I think it started, is like, okay, what's the exit strategy here, and how can we do it in a way that still um, values, and Dirty Bird is obviously a special kind of being an entity, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's been a lot of labels like, Ultra to Sony, or King Street to Armada or whatever, right?
Yeah,
That have been sold and gone on with the bigger labels. But Dirty Bird, and as you know, being part of it for so long, it's definitely a kind of a unique community or brand or whatever, right? Where it's like people don't just care about the check or care about it. It's like there's so many people that are so invested personally or spiritually
Yeah.
into this thing that, I think that was always something that we really, even we're going through that process of kind of the acquisition of like making sure that all was kind of stayed intact.
Mm.
Um, and for me, like I said, I'm running this thing for 10 years. I feel like it's almost mine as much as anybody else's. Like I've
Yeah.
really, me and Barkley worked very close together on the A&R and the lineups and bookings and stuff. But it was like, I was kind of responsible for executing everything. So
Yeah.
for me, and I'm passionate about it. I mean, I love it. Like, especially knowing all the fans and working with you guys and watching people like you and Walker and Royce and I mean, Fisher and everyone else, like, come up and do what you guys have done is like, that's so satisfying to me that I
Mm.
some teeny part in you guys' career at all, right? That we're
Yeah.
able to have that. So, and so for me, it was, it's been great and it continues to be great because that's still what my vision is now for it. And what our vision is like, we've never been the one that's like, okay, let's sign the big huge record from X amount, X DJ that's at the top right now. Um, it's more of like let's find talent, discover it. They might not use our platform, which has something to grow them, rather than
Yeah.
like what I think more back to what you're talking about, the major label type dance labels where they kind of like, okay, let's just gonna write you a check because you're not buzzing right now and you got X amount of monthly listeners and let's do that. Like that's just not what Dirty Bird does, and I don't think we succeed at that, right?
Mm.
So yeah, so for us it's still very much in that spirit as like, okay, let's discover new talent. And like I was looking at going back on all the albums we've done, right? And the albums
Yeah.
are for people like Lubelski, Corti, Steve Darko, even
Kill
Justin's first
friend.
album.
Kill
We're doing
frenzy.
Kill Frenzy, right? It's like not like these artists that are having this huge moment on a world platform. It's like literally just artists that we felt, you make really great music. I see your talent. Let's do this project together and like make something to have you make this piece of art. And we're doing that
Yeah.
with Sasha Robati. He's doing an album for us this year,
Love that.
which might be the first time we've actually announced that. But there you go. You have an exclusive, I guess.
Thanks for that.
But Sasha's one of those, right? This guy's been making music for 30 years and we put out some of his first records and he's played every
Yeah.
camp out and we were telling, we're like, hey, why don't you just do an album, right? Like it's just like
Mm.
that makes sense. It doesn't, so that's still very much at the forefront of what we're trying to do rather than just like follow that trend and get a big name and all that stuff too. Sometimes it works and sometimes you go into the long tail of things, but I think if we stray from that, it might not work otherwise.
It makes me so happy to hear that, man, because I think, especially as I'm sure you've seen it over the years, I've definitely seen it and experienced it and been part of it, where as artists, you sign to record labels and you have expectations of
Yeah,
what the label can do.
yeah,
And I think any artist that says they don't have an expectation of a record label is they're just lying to themselves, because I think you do, right?
yeah,
But I think there's certain record labels out there that have always created a sense of community and a sense of just being part of something. And Dirty Bird has always done that, right? And it's always been that. And I think, like, being honest, I think it got lost for a period of time. And I think politics and all of that, you know the score.
yeah,
That things can change, and also things go in and out of fashion.
right,
And I think, but at the end of the day, the core of what you guys have done is always been about just allowing artists to be artists. And I was never, when I was part of the Dirty Bird crew, I was never asked to write a record that sounded like a previous record I written,
yeah,
or go look at this artist, see what they're doing. Like, it was never. And Barkley you used to A&R me,
hmm,
but it was never like, it was never pushy to like make a record that would sell or make a record that would do better. It was purely try this. I never forget when I did that Take a Seat record,
yeah,
and it was me on the vocals. And Barclay was like, dude, can you just not get an actual American to like sing this? Because it's not like a British dude trying to do an American
Yeah,
accent.
right.
And I was like, yeah, I actually got oh damn, how have I forgotten his name? Dion. I got DJ
Dion, that's right.
Dion to do it.
Yes, indeed.
And then but it just didn't sound right. And then Barclay tried it, and Barclay just couldn't nail it. And Barclay just turned around and was like, dude, actually, yours is way better than all of
Yeah,
ours. So just stick with the original. But it was always like a very creative way. It was
yeah,
never based on how to sell records or based on how to like get extra streams. Although streaming wasn't really around when I first
yeah.
started that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of had that conversation with Sasha. Like, he came into town and came to our studios, and we kind of did a pre-album listening. And he's like, "Look, and we have talked about this before, but he kind of is getting really far along in the project. And he's like, look, I don't, there's not really quote unquote a lot of Dirty Bird songs on there." And I'm like, stop you right there, right? Like, it's like, I don't want you to make a Dirty Bird album that's Sasha Rabati. I want to make you a Sasha Rabati album. But that being said, I think one of the challenges that I've always had, especially as being in the A&R and signing the records, is, and as you know, and there's definitely the prejudice of what a Dirty Bird sound is, right? And I think sometimes people think it's something. The records like Walker and Royce is in the Bud and Whistler and shit like that. Those are the ones that get, oh, that's the sound of it. But we have records from Octave One and John Tejada, Robag and Roman Flugel and like a lot of records like DJ Markey, right? Which I think the Dirty Bird sound is much more than I feel like what some people put us in. But at the same time, I'm like, you kind of just go with it and you put music out. Maybe one day we'll be recognized as something else. But at the same time, it's back to what I was saying with Sasha. It's like, look, I want you to make your record, right? I don't want you to make a record that you think we want. We just want you to be creative, right? And like, we'll market it and put it out and give it to our fans in the community, whatever we can. But it's important that you're proud of the record and that you're not trying to make something because you think it needs to fit in this box, whatever it is, right? So
it's really interesting because, yeah, I agree with you, but I also Dirty Bird through a period it did have a sound, right? It had a very unique, and I think sometimes it can butcher it, right? When a label has a sound, and I think even Dirty Bird did that to a certain extent, where it kind of just got too much of like, okay, guys, we get it, but like I think sometimes you have to go through that to get to the other side, and Dirty Bird for me back in early or mid 2000s, like 2008 to when I signed to 2014, like it was the one record label that you didn't know what you were going to get from it, but every release was so unique and so special that there wasn't another record label doing it like that, and I don't really know if there has been since, in my opinion, that's been at that level of like really great underground house and techno or bass music.
No, I mean, and well, I mean, it was amplified, frankly, by our community, right, and our events and our, I think that's kind of the music was great, but the community was greater, and it's like the magic of like these. We as fans, even nowadays in the events we're doing this year and stuff, it's like people are coming with like tattoos of Dirty Bird and like shirts that they made and like all this merchandise that they're giving out. I mean, it's like that to me is probably the most rewarding thing of like seeing that community that's really pushed that up and supported us, right? The music has obviously been unique itself, but the community is, I mean, one of a kind, and it's great to see that. I don't think the music would have been as successful if it didn't have that community element, because the music was so weird, it was so different, and that it's like, where where do people play it, like what is it, but the community just wrapped their heads around it and help support it.
I think, yeah, I totally agree. I think it was also such a moment in time when dubstep was so popular in the
Yeah.
US, and it was like dubstep EDM culture, and Dirty Bird was kind of the entry route for those fans that love dubstep,
Mhm.
that kind of were a bit fed up with dubstep and wanted still like weird shit, but maybe got a slightly older and maybe wanted to hear some house and techno.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
was kind of that bridging gap of like, okay, well now this is the new era of what house music is for them. And but the community was only built through the artist,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
It was the only way that like a Dirty Bird party was the artist. It was that's how it truly got built.
Mhm.
And I don't know if it can be done again with something new on that level of where it was at that time. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely, it was lightning in a bottle type stuff, right? Where
Yeah,
it just worked and whatever. Um and I think you see a lot of, even nowadays, a lot of labels or brands that, they have their events and their parties, and you even see it like just in Miami Music Week last week, right? There's,
yeah,
you know, a Clooney party, a experts only party, the Paradise, the El Rey, right? There's all these, brands doing it. But and that there, it still is a bit different than what I think the Dirty Bird kind of party and community is and was, right? I mean, I don't think um but it came back to like those artists that were, championing it just as much. They're the ones wearing the 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 jackets and the camp out shirts and stuff like that, where they put as much time and investment into it as we did. So um and I think just, not to get too deep in the weeds on it, but obviously, club culture and everything is totally different now
totally
and it's
different.
changed, right? Like, I mean, I was at dinner with Soul Clap in Miami. And we're talking like, we've been going to Miami since the 2000s. Space was like the cheesy place. They're like, no one
Yeah,
ever went to space, right? And it's like, now that's like the temple of it all, And
yeah,
so, with like, hundreds to $500 entry fees and shit like that, right?
it's
It's just like,
crazy.
so it has changed the dynamic a bit, where it's not as for us, it was always kind of like family vibes or whatever. But now a lot of the artists, that we've, kind of helped build up and whatever, are more expensive than we can afford now for our,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Which is great. That's obviously what you want as someone that's, helping their careers. But, the reality is ticket prices and DJ fees and what the fans expect are a lot different now, than what it was.
yeah. Times have changed.
Yeah.
Times have changed massively, and whether it's better or good, it doesn't really matter. It's different, and I think you have to evolve with that.
Yeah. But I think it's, it's always seen this cycle so many
Yeah,
times. Dance music gets to a point, then it gets too cheesy, then it gets, and that's underground people or whatever kind of here. But there is definitely now, I feel like it's kind of broken through in the sense of like it's part of the general genre of culture, right? It's not some
yeah,
bastard child that's like, you know what I mean? I mean, it sells a lot of tickets. The fact you have, people selling out stadiums and like Coachella, like how many artists are, electronic artists, they built that whole Quasar stage, right? For
yeah,
extended sets. So I feel like we kind of crossed through that barrier of like dance music now is part of the collective culture, not just the underground raves with the map points and shit like that, right?
mm,
So, but there also there's still a disparity in terms of like actual recording and publishing revenue, right? Like
totally.
even some of the biggest artists you look at of our in our electronic music, if you look at like the holy grail of stats, right, is the Spotify monthly listeners, right? It's like their stats, the biggest might be only 7 or 10 million, as opposed to someone that's in another genre that's 50, 20, or
Yeah,
100.
yeah,
You know what I mean? So I feel like there's still that catching up to do, but at the same time, that this music isn't meant to be played in the car or on the thing. It's like when you're, turn around and playing those synthesizers and everything, you're not thinking, oh, I can't wait till someone listens to this to their Audi, right? You're thinking, I can't wait till someone is on the dance floor in front of a speaker
Yeah.
with their hands in the air screaming to the song. And I think that's what's very unique about our community is like, we then, it's meant to be experienced at an experience, not just pressing play on Spotify or Apple or whatever. And so that's where I've been seeing, like, even though we broke through that collective culture, I still feel like there's still ways to go before the recording revenues and everything kind of equal out to what our influence actually is.
Do you think it actually will, though?
I don't know, man. I mean, there's so many ways to game the systems, the shorter edits and fucking, putting vocals in earlier. I mean, I don't, it's going to be really hard to break through to like something that's going to be on the radio playing 24/7. I mean, especially here in the US, right? I mean, obviously it's much different in the UK where you've got the BBC shows and Germany and whatever, where it's played. But here in the US, I mean, it's still very, very limited. And, US radio is how you break songs, like, for stuff out here. So I don't see that really kind of, I don't see any writing on the wall that's going to say that's going to change, that dance music now is going to take over, some of the major stations or something like that. So I don't know. I mean, then you have some random songs like, that, have hundreds of millions of streams or whatever, but it's not as often, right? It's like even a song that you think, oh, this song's great, I'm hearing it at all the clubs, it still might only have like 500,000 streams or 1 million streams or whatever. So, I think it has a long way to go for it to be that, but I think what it does drive is obviously ticket sales. I mean, you look at Anima's Sphere run that's selling out. You look at, the millions of shows that go on every weekend, where they're generating a lot of money from dance artists. I mean, shit, with Miami Music Week, it was like Factory Town, Space, Toe Jam, all these places were full with, tens of thousands of people that are spending a lot of money on this stuff. You know what I mean? So,
and I think that's the question, though, because that's a really interesting one, because where with record labels, especially in electronic music, how do you, as a sole record label, when streaming is so low on a sense of like what they actually pay, and the splits and the costs, like the marketing costs alone now for any record, especially of like a higher caliber record artist, where they're trying to actually even just fucking reach 1 million streams, right? Like, know how hard reaching 1 million streams is nowadays.
Totally.
How does a record label even like make money?
Good question. I mean, well, it's, the power of the catalog, right? I think, building catalog is important, because, also the things you never know, especially now in the era we're living in, of like, it could be just this old song that gets added to a TikTok reel and all of a sudden this song's going up, right? So it's definitely about building the catalog, but, a lot of the stuff is, it's also building, I'm saying that I say a lot of times, a lot of the people that we work with, artists and people that are starting labels and stuff, is like there's very few successful labels, but much more successful brands, right? Even if you look at, all the parties that you went to in Miami Music Week or Amsterdam or whatever, it's like they're labeled, but they're more of a brand, right? They like, look at Another, right? They've got their No Art clothing line, they've got their events, they've got, a lot of the things that kind of encapsulate it, where frankly the record label now is just the loss leader, right? It's just the vertebrae for everything else, for the podcast, the merchandise, the events, the publishing, neighboring rights, right? It's like collecting all these revenue streams, but which all don't make any sense unless you have that spine, right? But starting a dance music record label is definitely not a get rich quick scheme, right?
No, not at all.
It's something that you have to be very passionate and patient about, and really think about if that's what you want to spend your time doing, because it's it's definitely a challenge to actually make money in this business.
Does Dirty Bird as a sense make money though? Because
Yes.
it's so embedded.
Yeah.
it's so embedded in underground, right? It's like you're not trying to sign. You're trying to sign big records, but like it's such uniquely underground, but
Yeah,
also so overground. If that makes
right,
sense,
right,
it's
right.
so strange.
Well, it is, and I'm even surprised it does, honestly.
Yeah,
Like, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, and I think it's the strength of what our catalog is,
yeah,
because we have, several thousand records in our catalog, and it's one of the things, I mean, I think, and that's thankful for streaming, right? Where,
yeah.
now songs are just kind of in the algorithms and playlists and all that stuff constantly being played. Granted, they're only making 0.00001, but
Yeah.
it wasn't back in the day where it's like, okay, we sold, 5,000 vinyl records, or we sold, 2,000 downloads, and then it kind of just filters out.
Mm,
Now the whole catalog is kind of just firing on every cylinder consistently. Um, but it's hard because a lot of times now you want that instant gratification of like,
of
okay, I put
course.
this record out, but I'm only seeing 10,000 streams this weekend or whatever. I mean, now the numbers have gotten so skewed in our heads on what actually is success, right? I think, 6, 7 years ago, if you were to say 10,000 people were listening to my song, you'd be
Crazy.
like, that's fucking amazing,
Yeah.
right? And now
Well,
you're like, man, if I sold put a record out and I only have 10,000 people in my first week, I'm like, this is a failure. Fucking, what do we got to do to boost this and market it, right? Um, so I think, it's, and then also generating revenue streams of our merch and our, bird
yeah.
feeds, stuff like that. But, you
Let's go
know,
back to that 10,000 though, because I think it's a really interesting like mindset for artists, and I'm sure you
yeah,
guys as label runners have, is like, I think the difference, in my opinion, the difference between what it used to be, if you had 10,000 downloads, it probably meant
yeah,
that the record was doing something in the scene that was extremely special,
yeah,
first of all. So your record's doing really, really well in the scene. Secondly, 10,000 downloads means it's a pretty good amount of cash, right?
yeah. Hmm.
Whereas 10,000 streams, a lot of it doesn't mean 10,000 people are actually listening to it,
Yeah,
especially if
yeah,
it's been put on a playlist. It means that you're getting probably a lot of people background listening to your record, that
yeah.
it's
Right,
just
right.
being played on playlist background. And 10,000 streams probably generates about £3.50.
Yeah, if that.
Exactly. So it's like, I think like, I totally agree with you. And for me, like with my album, like I look at the streams and they're not where I want them to be, right? And they're not where the label want them to be. But then I look at it and go, actually, we probably got one or two playlists from Spotify, and everybody listening to that is fans and they follow me. And you can see the stats that like, oh, actually, most of your fan base that follow you listen to this album.
Yeah,
And then you're like, okay, now that makes a little more sense. Bearing in mind, you're not making any fucking money out of that, but you've got a record that's done 250,000 streams, and maybe that's 30,000 people that have listened to that a bunch of times, and you're like, okay, cool, that's great. Um, but it's also that chicken and egg situation, right? Where you're like, we do this because we love it. Of course we do. Like we realistically, in the grand scheme of music, electronic dance music isn't, up until now, it hasn't really been a big earner over the years for
yeah.
majority
I
of
mean,
artists, right?
it still isn't if you look at the repertoire of major labels or any label,
Exactly.
right? It's
Yeah.
yeah,
It's a lot of labels just have a dance music arm for purely culture, right?
yeah,
It's how do we have market presence in every culture?
right.
Um, but so I guess that's the tough thing of like, now a million streams means nothing in the grand scheme of streaming, which is fucking crazy.
Right, right, right.
But
I mean, yeah,
how do you deal with that with artists, right? It's like an artist comes to you, signs a record label, signs a deal, signs just a single record, right? And then have this huge expectation. How do you kind of communicate that to artists, especially new artists in the game?
yeah. Well, I mean, and not just with Dirty Bird, but a lot of like artist deals and labels and stuff we sign, and they're like, okay, well, I want X amount of dollars and all this stuff, and I have this conversation. I'm like, look, granted, we believe in you. You're a great
Yeah.
artist, but what you're asking for is equal to like 20 million streams.
Yeah.
Like, I've honestly put it into that equation now with people of like, look, it's not that we don't want to give you this and invest into you this, but you realize for you to make money back on this and for us to make money back, you have to do this, back to the napkin math where it's like, you need to sell, or do 20 million streams or whatever. And
Yeah.
in order to get your money back, and your top record has like 1.5 million, that's great. That's commendable. But that's the reality. That's the conversations we have. And like, how do we get it to a place, and what are some more organic things we can do, or things that, without just doing a huge PR campaign and spending, thousands of dollars on whatever it is, radio or whatever. It's like, that's kind of what's been exciting for us in our department now is like, okay, let's look at all the other things we can do about this
Yeah.
that are actually going to add more to like people growing and people listening to your music, rather than like, okay, I just need to get on the Mint playlist and I need to get on, the top 10 at Beatport or whatever. It's like, getting a playlist is not a marketing strategy.
No.
It's like, as when you just did your album, right? Like, it's like, there's so many things that you had to do to even just get it to this point to where you're still, you're not even fully satisfied with the numbers that it's even doing, because I
Yeah.
think it's almost like a ceiling that you can almost never hit with something like that. The album, especially in a dance music album, is so, challenging, right? Like, you look at some of the bigger ones, the bigger artists that released albums this year that, are selling out stadiums and, world tours. I mean, those numbers aren't huge, right?
No,
Like,
not at all.
yeah. So, you do the math again, you're like, oh, well, this artist must have got X amount of dollars, but he only 10 million streams on a full album. That's,
It's not a lot.
it's not a lot. But I think the magic word you just said a few minutes ago was the culture, right? And I think that's something that's so unique with this community, is it's the culture, man. It's like, that's really what it is. And that's then, that's where you can actually make good money, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you tour a lot, you see that, doing events, selling the merch when people buy it, it's like, there's revenue streams out there to be made. And so, that's why I don't solely look on, okay, this only had 10,000 streams, right? It's
Yeah.
like, okay, that's in the bigger picture of things. How does this add to the culture, rather than how is this like making, a penny profit?
Yeah. It's really interesting though, because obviously now you're kind of head at electronic at Empire as well. Like, okay, let's say for instance, understand with the Dirty Bird arm now you have the events and you have the merch side and you have all of that, right? So you have like another level of revenue that can kind of help boost the Dirty Bird as itself. But how do you do that as a record label when you're signed into Empire as an electronic, or do you not do that?
Again, we look at, what the potential is, and, there's, again, a lot of different things that we can do in terms of, maybe we don't need to, again, what we're investing in, but also, there's the publishing revenue, there's the neighboring rights, the recording, the performance revenue, which is actually a lot because people are playing those songs in the clubs and whatever. And, there's the sync stuff, which doesn't happen too often, but it can be, magic when it does.
Yeah.
But, and it's also, it's interesting because some of the artists or labels that we have signed or whatever, the expectation they never actually met. And some of the ones where we maybe did like a smaller, just straight distro deal or something like that, where they're actually outperformed everything, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, random artists that we had signed, kind of passively, they're like number 2 on iTunes downloads and number 1 on Amazon. I'm like, we didn't contribute much to that. I mean, we did a
Yeah.
little bit, right? But it's like, that's also the other thing too, is you never fucking know, man. Like, you just never know what's gonna hit or what's not. And so I always tell artists, I'm like, look, I feel like it's more beneficial for you to have a partner or a system in place to where you can push your art out as much as possible. And like, I think a lot of artists, they get into the trap of, oh, it needs to be perfect. I'm gonna wait. And I'm like, dude, just fucking fire it off, man. Like, like, Just fire it off, put it out into the world. You never know what's going to hit. The song you think is your baby that is not probably isn't the one anyways. It's going to be the
No.
one you didn't even think about, right? And but I think that's the hardest part of being a creator, creative is like obviously you're putting your art out into that world, and especially nowadays when Spotify has that number right next to the tracks, right? That didn't even exist. Even on Beatport, when we were selling or vinyl records, you didn't have that little number next to the song where everyone can see what you're doing, right? And I think that it's like when the Instagram took away the like button or how many likes you have. Like it's just a mental thing that fucks with you as an artist where it's like, oh, I'm seeing my song and I only see this small number here and I'm looking at this artist that has this big number here. That's gonna fuck with you and your creative, your creativity, I believe, and like, your insecurity about yourself
Yeah.
and things like that. So, to kind of get back to your question, we kind of really just work with them and like, okay, this is an all-encompassing thing. It's not about the one song. It's about continuing to push and push and push. So I feel like that's the message, not like, okay, let's sign you because you have one hit song and let's put the song out and it's going to be number one and we're all going to fucking go drink Dom Perignon, right? Like,
It's really interesting that because you're so right about the number thing, right? Like, and I think beforehand, obviously you had charts, but we've always had charts in music, and I think there's always been that situation of like, oh, cool, got Beatport number one or Beatport top genre or something like that, or Apple Tunes or
but
something like that.
but there was still a black box behind it, right?
Of course,
I mean,
of course.
people like, oh, Beatport number one. I had a thing in my head, even as someone that looked at those, that looked at sales reports every month on what him, I still, kind of knew what the Beatport number one is, but it was still all a black box of what you saw. And now that number is like flashing red for everyone to see and for you to be judged on. I mean, that's what we've judged people and like what deals we're signing or whether or not we're going to sign them based on that number, which is a really shitty thing to say and unfortunate in the creative space. But that number can probably do some damage to some creatives, right?
I think it's also, yeah, totally. I think it actually stops good art being made. Because I think especially nowadays, like we're in this world where everything has to be packaged in a certain way to be sold. Being different, being weird doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to sell a lot of records or stream well. Like you're gambling, right? And I think sometimes when you're gambling, you take the easy odds to a certain extent to kind of make sure that you win that gamble. And I think you're seeing that now. Streaming is so part of our lives that you get a lot of music that sounds exactly the same.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, and that's it where, again, just because I was just there in Miami and there's so many things there, but I heard a lot of the same sounds, right? Of a record that I'm not going to say what record it was, but a lot of it sounded like this one record that's been really hot. And it's like, the cycle is again continuing. People were trying to make it what it is.
The Stephanie remix. Like, let's be honest, it's like I'm gonna say it because the thing is, I love Clooney and I love Hunter. Like Hunter Siegel's been doing it for fucking years and trying to break through, and now he's finally broke through. And the thing is not actually about. There's not an issue with that record. What the issue is?
It's everyone trying to make it sound like that record, and like literally, like I'm like, oh, is this another Stephanie remix? I'm like, no, it's just someone else trying to make it sound like that, which is a great record. Way I love it, by the way. It's so fun. I can't. It's always in my head, but that's now what people are trying to make, and because they see the success of it, and it's like it's that that bass line that he does, and like the
I actually, it's never really been like that until Fisher came on. Until Fisher losing it happened. If I'm honest with you, from what I can remember, the only time that it seems to have started happening, and that was kind of correlating with streaming happening, right?
Yeah.
But like the Fisher losing it, that everything tried to be Fisher losing it then afterwards, and it's like it makes a really weird taste in my mouth when it's like, what are you doing this for? And I don't think that's necessarily just artists. I think that's labels trying that as well. And I think it's it works once, it doesn't work twice.
No, and it gets stale pretty fast, and it dilutes what those records were. And it's going to change next year. It's going to be something totally different.
Of
And
course.
like, I mean, I think the year before, it was like, well, I kept hearing it was just the rolling bass line of like the space line, right? Of like the inevitable like 24-hour thing, right? And that's just the nature of music is the cyclical thing, because everyone wants, oh, hey, this is a success, I know how to make this record, I'm gonna go watch a YouTube video that literally tells me how to make this record, and I'm gonna, people are gonna love me, right?
It's
So
like Afro, right? It's like, let's be honest, like the Afro genre, as much as I actually do really enjoy listening to it sometimes, I'm just like, guys, where's the creativity? It's like, let's be
yeah,
like, you're not kind of music. You're never going to be kind of music. You're not black coffee, and you're never going to be black coffee. So fucking the reason why they are what they are is because they've worked out what works for them, and
yes,
it's not going to work for you. You'll take a
no,
piece of the pie, right?
no,
You'll definitely take a piece of the pie, but it's never going to be that level.
no, it's never gonna be that level. And it's not to say that you can't make those records, but I think it's always about like, I mean, it's about making things that what you want to make, not what something else. And Rick Rubin would probably love what we're talking about right now. And it's like these
Yeah.
whole thing of like, you got to make something for yourself, not for other people. And that's what ends up happening, because they want to get more gigs, or they want to sell records, or they want to get a record deal. So they end up making what they think the trends are happening. And I mean, shit, man, from music to fashion to, food, whatever, that's all, it's all part of the ecosystem, that's just what happens. But, you know, as someone that's kind of been part of this for, nearly 3 decades and seeing it, it's like, oh, okay, I kind of see right through it now.
Yeah. How does that make you feel though? Because I think where you came from, like initially, I don't, please tell me if I'm wrong as well, but like I think even when it started for me, it didn't really, you couldn't really see through it so easily.
Yeah.
Now it's just glaring on the wall of like,
Yeah.
you're just so
Well,
trying not to be.
also, that's all I think, I mean, I kind of came up in like the whole vinyl, like, it was like,
Yeah.
you only could get dance music if you went physically into the store. I mean, Juno wasn't even really a thing of like mail
No.
order, right? Like, it's like you literally had to travel the country or world and go in and like, and pull these records off the wall and base it on like what you see on the cover and listen to them and figure out if you want to play that, right? So that barrier to entry was so much bigger, because then you had to press records, which is insane to me, that all that whole culture back then, by the way, it's like how many of those records were getting pressed and people were spending money. I mean, it's just, I think about that quite a bit of like, and then there's full on retail stores with these records of nobody named DJs or artists you've ever heard of. And you're pulling these records off a wall because it has a purple flower on it. And you know what I mean? And then the lore that goes around it. But I think that barrier to entry now is so much different than now you can just, literally make something on AI or GarageBand or Ableton and like post it up on DistroKid and then be online tonight, right? And so I think like with anything like that, where it's that easy to do something, it's gonna get washed out by all of the BS, right? As opposed to that culture where it was like, people had to, get a master, like a real mastering engineer, and press a lacquer and like make actual physical things. I mean, like we used to like handwrite and like go find, and this wasn't even, Google wasn't even a thing, and like try to find addresses for DJs and put white labels and physically mail them out, spend like $700 on freaking postage fees to like send it off into the ether and hope that they're going to play the record, right? And now it's like, hey, here's a WhatsApp, here's a file, you know what I mean? So that inherently is going to change the culture and what becomes popular, because now anyone can have access to it.
I think there's pros and cons to it, right?
Yeah, for sure. And you have seen people like that have never, that wouldn't have access to it, that now are, traveling the world, really successful.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's a weird industry you work in. I guess for me, I want to talk to you about the power of community. you've seen it massively with Dirty Bird. You guys have just announced Dirty Bird Camp Out versus Northern Nights Music Fest.
Yeah.
I think it's July 18th to 20th.
It
Right?
is. Yes.
Dirty Bird community was and is like still one of the most powerful communities in dance music. How important is it for artists to build their own community?
I mean, I think it's required, honestly, right? And I think, I mean, even with Dirty Bird, right? And I've talked about this, like, you know, with Walker and Royce and Justin and, you know, even you and, you know, some of these other artists where it's like, look, we are the platform, we'll give it to you, but in order to get real success, like, you know, like we help Walker and Royce with this art, with their RDA label. Like we see like it's going to trickle down, but especially in dance music, it's like having your own culture. Justin Martin doing What to Do, right? You know, you doing your stuff like on your own. Like it's so important because it's you things change even within the label community where we sign more artists and, you know, maybe you can't play all the shows as you once did, or, you know, you can't, we only have so many record slots a year. We can't I'll sign everything we want to sign from you or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
So, it's like, it's important that I mean, I think it's required that you kind of have to build that community within yourself. Um, that being said, though, it's like dance music is also a bit different from other genres where you're not really signed exclusively to a label, unlike if you're in hip hop or R&B or country, right? It's like you want to be on Dirty Bird, you want to be on, you know, Ultra, you want to be on Experts Only, right? That helps actually everyone. Because each one of those labels hits a different audience and has different marketing strategies or whatever, and that's a little bit more accepted in this world where every other genre is like, nope, you're assigned to Sony and you're our artist and you can't fucking do anything else there. You got to get label waivers if you want to even put your voice on some shit, right? And like here in dance music, it's like, great, you want to put a record out on, you know, any other label? I guess we see the value in that. You know, so, and that's kind of how you can build that community, but it's you know, it's something that I feel like you kind of have to do at this phase. Again, it goes back to not just labels but brands, and brands being that community of what everything makes it up, right?
Brand is everything. I think even back in the day, like look at the Ninja Tunes, look at the XLs, they built brands back in the day. I wouldn't say necessarily they have as much power as they did, but I think those were the label brands that kind of really pushed culture, right? And it's the same for Dirty Bird. It's the same for Hot Creations during its day. Defected as well. They kind of all did 100%. These things where subliminal, like there was a handful or multiple handfuls of labels that really pushed great music. I think nowadays it's more so in the artist's hands. It's more so in the power of the artist to kind of drive that. Which I think is kind of, this sounds really wrong saying this to you, but it's kind of the death of a record label as we knew it, right? I think it's also the powers back in artists' hands, which I think is a beautiful thing if the labels can kind of work with artists and kind of give the artists what they don't have on their team. Because it's a whole different role.
You can't search Dirty Bird on Spotify, right? You have to search
it by the artist.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
And you know what I mean? So you're very much correct in the sense of like it's an artist game. Obviously, the download stores are different, and we're probably the only genre left that downloads matter because DJs need it. But you know, you can't search Hot Creations on on Spotify or Apple Music or Tidal or whatever, right? So it's like it also puts a lot more pressure on the artist as well 100%. Because you know, before, like going back to our, you know, going in the store, it was like there was the Dirty Bird section and there was a Defected section, and you knew what you were, you know, what it's going to be, so you would go right there and you would pull records out from artists you never heard of, right? But now that doesn't exist on the, you know, virtual record shelves out there in the streaming world. It's like those bins are non-existent. So you as an artist now have to empower your audience or whatever to go find you and to go discover you, rather than having the label do the work of like, oh yeah, you're signed to Dirty Bird, you're signed to Defected. Like, I got to take a listen, right? I mean, I think to a certain extent, though, we're obviously doing it through socials and newsletters and events and stuff. But for the big picture, it's primarily, you as an artist up there kind of all on your lonesome.
Yeah, because it's also really hard to run a social media profile when it's about multiple things, right?
Yeah.
Which is what a record label is about. Multiple artists, it's about multiple events. It's like you're not specifically reaching. I found that with the podcast, right? Is like some people that follow me don't want to hear about my podcast because they're like
Yes.
music fans. They're not like industry people, right? And it's like you're kind of building two brands. It's the same with the record label. It's like when I started signing other people to the record label, it was like, well, my fans don't necessarily care about other people. It's like they follow you for you. And you kind of also have to understand that. It's like there's going to be a percentage that do, but realistically, you can't expect everyone to like what you do.
No. And I mean, on that note, though, like also your fans, they put a certain level of trust in you as a curator, right?
Totally.
As like someone, like, I trust your taste. Like, you're not playing all your own records when you go DJ, you're
Yeah.
playing other people's records. So we trust that you as a curator can do that, right? But it is two separate tracks of like, okay, I'm Will Clarke, the artist, but then, I'm the label too, which doesn't include me. So
No,
it's that
totally.
challenge that it definitely is hard.
So I want to talk about the process of signing records to sign in to releasing the A&R process and everything like that kind of you take as Dirty Bird and also as Empire. So somebody sends you a record or you find a record. What's the process? Just for people that don't know of how it works.
I mean, we get about maybe 400 to 500 demos a week.
Jesus.
Yeah.
I feel sorry
But
for you.
but it's always been our thing that we listen to them all. I mean, usually you can tell within like one or two kick drums, right? But
Yeah.
and for us, except for us, we're in a bit different situation than I think others, where it's not. We literally listen to it, and we've always signed things this way. When me and Barkley were doing it as well, it's like, okay, do we like the song? Great. Then we'll kind of, then once we like the song and then we feel it's really strong, then we'll kind of start doing okay, let's look them up on other platforms or whatever. But for the most part, at least for Dirty Bird, it's kind of like, it's a feeling more than it is like the numbers thing, right? I mean, I think last year alone, I think I put out like 3 or 4 people where it was either their first or second record ever. It was just a good record. I was like, why
Love
not?
that.
You know what I mean? I mean, we didn't put like a ton of crazy money in it, but we have our PR company that does it, and we do some boosts and stuff like that. I was like, let's just put it out in the world. And then we have our Bird Feed subscription, which is like the super fans, where it's kind of like our farm league, so to speak, where it's like, you know what, this song is really, really good. But it might not be, you can't take up one of those key slots, right? I mean, we do like 24 records a year or so, give or take. So, it's always kind of that. And honestly, it's a challenge too. Like, before, me and Barkley kind of had a back and forth, right? And Barkley got to road tested some stuff, but now we kind of have to rely on some of our, our internal teams. We have our A&R meetings. We have, I'll send it out to some other people, other DJs and stuff to test it out. So, it is a little bit of that too, of like, okay, is this going to work? Do we feel like our fans are going to resonate with it? Is it something that we want to put behind? So, which is much different than signing a record like to outside of Dirty Bird, where it tends to be a bit more on a numbers game, because we have the platform to like put that in there. We can put it on some, recap videos and stuff like that, where the other one, it's kind of like, okay, well, if we're going to, and I think if it's not a Dirty Bird, people are expecting a certain level of monetary capital investment or whatever. So that has to go into the consideration when we sign those records.
And then you've signed the record. What happens then?
We get it to our whole team. We schedule it. We Dirty Bird's also unique, where each year we have a unique artist, so I call it artist in residence. But this year I'm just so excited. This artist Sam Flores, who's like an amazing local San Francisco artist. He's phenomenal. But I basically send him a lead. All right, the song's called, Riverside, whatever the heck it is, and like they have full creative control. Comes up with a drawing, and then we get it in the system, and then we get it to our PR team, and we have what's called like a big idea call, where it's like between our sales teams, our marketing team, the artists, the managers, whoever's involved, PR, etc. And we just talk about, okay, what are we going to do with this record? What's your vision for it? Tell us about it. What's the story that we can do? And I think that goes back to everything is a story, right? I mean, how many songs did you have on your album? Like
10,
12?
13.
15,
Yeah.
right? So there's 14 stories, right? Each one of those had its own story, and then the story of the album. And then I think that's what people are going to grasp onto. It's not going to be like, okay, it's out now, here's a streaming link. It's like, hey, this is a story of this song, and this is why it's important or whatnot. And people are going to find it on whatever it is. So for us, it's more about just getting these kind of what's the vision for it, and where did this come from, and how, and then our team can go and formulate like how we're going to spread the message about it, right?
No, totally. And then from the day of release onwards, is there a carrying on of work behind the scenes, or is it kind of out to the world and you're on your own?
Yeah, I mean, we always feel that, and I've always said it's like think beyond the 1 week release cycle, right? Like, especially now. I mean, before it was about getting those first week numbers on downloads and stuff, but now it's like, okay, let's, after a couple of weeks, let's maybe do an influencer campaign or whatever. Let's put it on some other content that we're doing that's not related, just to get the song out there. Let's start taking videos of people that are playing it. So, I mean, I think even like last week we were, reposting some people that were playing songs that were several years old and stuff, right? So, that's when it kind of just begins. I mean, there's obviously all the stuff leading up to it, but once the song's released, now it's out in the world, right? Now people can actually tag it on their Instagram stories. They can actually Shazam it. They can actually do all that stuff. And I think that's where, you can start to see those numbers kind of build up and the story develop itself. Rather than just like, okay, it's Friday release day, here, everyone's out, and then walk away and like, okay, on to the next. I mean, there's some, you kind of got to live in the parallel universes of that Friday, release cycle announcements, but also there's all 6 other days in the week that you can fill it with, the void. And it means other music from the catalog, content, and stuff like that.
What's your thoughts on releasing music on Fridays? I have this like extreme hate for it, that the industry just tells you have to release music on a Friday, and why not on a Monday or a Tuesday? And it's kind of, I understand the concept, right? Like,
I don't understand the concept, because I came from like release day was Tuesdays. And his Tuesday release day was awesome. But now Fridays, people are gone on Fridays, and like, oh, the song is like missing a featured artist or whatever. Then you have to like, people are panicking all weekend or whatever. And also everything comes out at the same time. So we've kind of had a lot of internal conversations about that, of like, it doesn't really need to be out on Fridays, and like, can we put it out on other, other days? And I think it's changed a bit now. Before, the editors were so, okay, I only want to feature the latest stuff that comes out on this Friday, and that's how they plan. But we've seen now where we do release stuff on even a Thursday or Wednesday, it'll still get the love that it needs to get. And you're kind of not talking amongst the noise. But yeah, man, the Friday release day thing, it's like, I wish they'd go back to midweek, because
I just don't think there should be a specific date where everyone releases music, because I think you've got to think like you're fighting against so much noise on one day. Like, I'd rather, let's say for instance, 110,000 records come out in a week. Like, okay, let's split that between 5 days or even 7 days. Like, it doesn't really fucking matter if it comes out on a Sunday or a Monday or a Tuesday. When, like, you then cut down the noise from like 100,000 to like 10,000, and you're like, okay, well, I can live with that. Right. Like, And
and I
there's
think you're seeing people do that, right? Like Skrillex just drops his album on a Tuesday,
yeah,
you know. And I think, and I feel like there's also that people are like, oh, I'm not Skrillex, so I can't do that. But yeah, you can
yeah,
actually. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like it's okay. Like I don't, you know. And you're right. It's like let me just pull aside away from all the other noise and like things that are people going to be like just scrolling right past, or maybe my voice can be heard a little bit more on a Wednesday rather than like on a Friday when everyone else is talking about it and people are on the planes to vacations or whatever.
yeah. And it's so strange because I think it's like, what do people want? Like Mondays, a lot of people don't like, right? A lot of people don't like they're going back to work. So it's like, what
Yeah,
better thing to do is hear new music from your favorite artist on a Monday and be able to
right.
enjoy it for the whole week before the weekend gets too busy and you forget about it. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm pushing for Mondays.
Yeah, man. I mean, there's no reason not to. I mean, I think the labels and everything and the suits, just to use the word, they're I think it's for so long to them they can't see the playlist ads and the successes for 4 more days, so they don't know. They can't get their head around like, oh well, we have to wait 4 days for it to actually get into the algorithms and the stream and the playlist. So
Yeah,
we need to get it's like, and I think that's where it comes from of like, okay, well, we need to get that instant hit that like that straight
yeah.
inject me with fucking numbers. Fucking
But
like
we all
that
know
hit.
that it doesn't happen like that now unless you're a
Yeah,
fucking massive artist or unless it's popping off on TikTok. So it's like
yeah,
realistically, like I think being able to prove yourself that wait, actually this record is growing organically, like that's the most important thing about a record is like
yeah,
organic growth of like, okay, yeah, like can you get 10,000 streams in a day? Oh, actually, I can get that every day until Friday. Oh, actually, that means that like there's 10,000, potentially 10,000 people, or let's say 5,000 people listening to this every single day. Like, okay, well, going into Friday now, like you don't have the Sunday drop off that it happens every Sunday, right? Because
yeah,
people would fucking hungover or just don't want to listen to club music because they've heard it all fucking weekend. And
yeah.
it's like, okay, well, let's. I don't know. I'm really gunning for this.
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that because like I don't actually, I like the editorial playlist. I don't personally, I don't listen to as much, and I've been a Spotify like paying subscriber since they started. It's
Yeah,
just and I'm a big fan of it. But I my favorite playlist is my Discover Weekly on Mondays, the
yeah,
algorithm ones, because I discover so much shit, and I start my Mondays off with it, and it's like you said, it kind of gets me through the week. And then the Friday the
mm,
release radar comes in, which tends to not be as curated as nicely as the Discover one because there's obviously much more to pull from.
yeah,
Um, and I think that's, going back into it where, before streaming, everything like majority of sales came from those first week sales. Now,
yeah,
majority of sales are coming from the catalog
yeah,
because it's that type of thing where like people are going to their Discover Weeklies, or like my wife listens to the same fucking song on repeat. She'll just play that shit over and over and over again, right? So it's like that is more than just like the release radar. I tend to skip a lot more on that on
yeah.
the new stuff rather than like Discover Weekly. I'll find I add it to my library much more. So I think that's the power of the catalog too, right?
Yeah, and I think also like we're talking specifically Spotify here, and this is no disrespect to Spotify. I understand they're trying to do their tech thing and whatever, but the curated playlists now are not as curated by a human,
Yeah,
which then means, in my opinion, like before the curated playlist that were all created, like all 50 records were curated by a human, not AI, you were
yeah,
getting, you were discovering interesting music. Where now a lot of it, maybe the top 10 or the top 20 is curated by a human, but the rest of it's curated by AI
yeah,
and your algorithm. And that just for me just is like, well, I actually want to be pushed new music. Why do I go listen to a electronic dance music playlist or a rap playlist? Or I don't want to hear the biggest records. I want to hear interesting records. We all know what the biggest records are, right?
yeah.
I think
Well,
that's
and
also go on.
well, I was just gonna say a lot of these, these big playlists too. It's like you look, that same song is on
Yep.
7 of this different playlists. It's like, what's the difference, right? And then those
Mm,
just will be there for literally months or years of like,
Yeah.
like you go on Mint or Housework or whatever, you're going to find records that have been on that chart for, 6-9
Ever.
months.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the records that you heard. So it's interesting because those playlists, which if you can, compare them analogy wise to like what the record walls were at a record store, right? I think they're used in different ways because
Yeah.
before it was like the record wall would just every week the guy behind the counter would pick up the
Choosing.
records and put them there, choose it. And now it's like that record wall, they put them up there, but like, I'm putting this up there because it's the biggest record and I'm going to let that stay there until we're going to sell a ton of much. So it's not
Yeah.
that like tastemaker curation isn't as, forefront as just like, okay, this has X on it and is doing crazy numbers and we have to put it in this playlist
Yeah.
because,
I agree. Hot take.
yeah.
If Spotify stopped the top 10 on an artist profile by not putting the number one streamed record at the top, but put their most recent releases in order, do you think that would change the game?
That's a good question. I've never thought about that, but I always think about what does it be like if they took the numbers away.
I agree with
Like,
that. Totally agree. But I think by putting the artist's new record at the top
yeah,
and it's based on release, you're getting like, let's say for instance with me, like Rock With Me is my biggest record. It's
right.
biggest streaming record. It
Yeah,
outstreams most of my records, but it's like
right.
you're not getting that. That's not my new music. That's 4
Yeah,
4 years old.
yeah, and I think you're right. I think it would change the thing. And then, honestly, it's hard to even find the most recent record because it's like
It's
you go
impossible.
down like the popular releases. You got to go to the
Yeah.
discography or whatever, or unless they put it in their picks. But you're right. Like you get that record that goes big, and that's your glass ceiling. Where this is now I'm going to be defined by this record that has all the streams for whatever reason. Um, but yeah, I think you're right. I think it probably would change the things, but I think if it's the numbers thing though too, because then if you go to the latest record, and like, oh, this only has 7,000 streams, this guy must suck, or
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, again, it's the mental thing, like putting those numbers of streams next to these tracks, and I mean, as far as I know, Spotify is really the only one that does it. This is the most popular platform. Apple doesn't do it or whatever, but
No.
I think it definitely affects creativity, man. Like, it's
100%.
definitely like you're again attaching yourself to a popularity number that isn't even fairly accurate because I mean, like in hip hop or whatever, I mean, Apple Music I guess is a lot more popular than Spotify. So
Is it
even though
really?
yeah, so like
Wow.
so it's so yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, it works for us as the A&Rs and the label managers of the world, but as an artist, man, that fucking number's
Sucks.
like the scarlet letter, right?
It fucking
Or your
sucks,
top
man.
song, right? It's like a scarlet.
Yeah. And the thing is like it's a platform for artists, right? It's in a
Yeah,
sense of like you're bearing everything to the world. You're not just bearing your music, you're bearing your numbers, which no one should know. It should be like it's like putting your bank balance on
yeah,
literally your bank balance on the screen because it's like, okay, I can work out that
yeah,
I can work out what record label that is, and then go chat GPT. What's the average record deal that record label does? They tell you the record label, and then you can go
yeah,
work out. Oh, actually, that person's made this much money from this record,
yeah.
and you're like, that's not. I'm sure nobody's doing that, but like,
No, but honestly, they are, and maybe not
true,
ChatGPT, but it's like and I call it raver math because it's like and that's with like shows and strip things. It's like, oh, they did Dirty Bird Camp Out and there was 5,000 people there. They must have made like $20 million. It's like they get the tickets are $300 or whatever.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
the same thing happens where people like it's this raver math where they like, oh well, you must be rolling in freaking gold bullion, right? But it's like because they come up with this thing, or you're not, or you're making shit. But then they realize like, hey, I've got a brand deal, or I've got this crazy
mm,
stuff like that, right? So you're right. It's like displaying your bank balance, but it might only be one account, not the rest of the accounts, right?
It's also really interesting how brands kind of turn into fads. And I think Dirty Bird did that for a period of time, right? Like, I think where a brand gets so popular, people just like it because it's popular, right? I'm seeing it at this moment in time. Like, I've spoken to friends that aren't in the music industry that are like kind of new in the music world, and it's lowest common denominator of like what are you a fan of, and are you a fan because you love the music, or are you a fan because everyone else loves it? And
Right.
I think that's a scary part of being a brand, right? Because it's you're making the most amount of money you possibly can because everyone's there. But I think for me, that's also the end of the brand to a certain extent, because it's not necessarily based around people making their own decisions. It's based on popularity, and it's scary. It's really scary.
I mean, and it is, and it's hard, and it's kind of this also this, this battle in your head too, right? Of like, I want to be, cool and underground and everything, but I also need to be commercial, and since I need to, pay our artists and pay rent and all that stuff, and so it's you're right. It's like, that it could be the end of the brand to be popular, but then isn't that what you want as a brand to be popular so that you can continue doing the brand, right? And it's like this fucked up wheel of like fucking insecurity and ego, right? Where it's like, it's like, and I think even at Dirty Bird, we've always had, I think that's been one of our challenges too, of like, as our popularity grows, people think, people look at us as this, but we're trying to be this, but we need to make this, and so it's definitely something that I think any successful brand or artist or label has to deal with. And like, there's certain, you kind of there's certain points in your life or points of the story where you take the red pill, blue pill. Like, am I going to do it this way? And are we going to go this route, or are we going to go back under the hole and, whatever, and to be cool or whatever that is. Right. And I think that's probably the biggest, I mean, for me, is like, like helping lead this whole team is balancing that of what Dirty Bird is now and was, and what people expect, and still being surprises and stuff like that, right? It's like that's my challenge, and our challenge is being that.
No, I love it, man. I love it, dude. Thanks so much for coming on.
Man. So good to see you and hear you, and
likewise, man. Likewise.
And congrats on all your stuff, man. Like I said, this podcast is so good to see what you've done with this. I listen to it all the time. Some of the guests you are on there, I'm like, well, we'll get this guy, and like, whatever. But it's you've really made a great platform here, man. And again, it goes to one of those things, like the fact that I played any part in your career to see where you're at that's all I need, man.
No, man, generally you guys started it. Well, it didn't start it, but helped me get to the point of where I'm at today. Like I will always say that from day one, is Dirty Bird was the foundation part of my career.
Man.
Thank you so much, man.
Thank you for having me, brother. Appreciate it.
No worries. Big love, man.
Will I see you in Ibiza?
Maybe. Let's wrap this. I'll talk after. One sec.
Okay.
And that's a wrap. Big love to Deron for coming on. Thanks for listening. Till next time, people. Big love.